Welcome, Kemosabe. I'm Detective Lloyd Gross, and this is the Season 1 preview episode of the Anti-Strangling Task Force. In this episode, we'll be previewing Season 1 primarily by looking at the rest of the intro sequence. Now, given that we have worked out that there is a secret sign in the intro sequence, we now need to be mindful that perhaps the rest of the intro sequence has clues.
So what does that tell me? Once I uncover one lie like that, I know there's a whole bunch more lying going on.
Now, I can tell you that this is 100% the case. The entire intro sequence is there to provide us with direction as to the true nature of the story of the Scranton Strangler. The first shots of the intro sequence were filmed by John Krasinski with his friends when they went for a drive through Scranton prior to filming, as I understand it. Now, I don't think John would have known about the Scranton Strangler mystery at this point if he knows at all, right? But I believe these shots are primarily included to establish setting. So I don't think they have any particular relevance. These shots weren't produced by the creators who were in the know, and therefore I believe these particular shots are purely about establishing setting. Which brings me to the next shot, which is the Dunder Mifflin warehouse. Now, the warehouse, guys, has significant relevance to this mystery. I've already mentioned that Dwight has family members working in the office, and this includes the warehouse. In fact, the warehouse in some ways is the stepping stone for getting into the office as a salesperson or an admin worker or whatever, right? So the warehouse has a central role in this mystery. We need to be mindful of who's working in the warehouse, who's managing the warehouse. We need to look at the power dynamics in the warehouse as well. And there are at least a number of episodes where the puzzle is strictly related to what's going on in the warehouse, right? So the clue being given to us here is basically directing us to the warehouse. We need to be mindful of this, and I can tell you through my investigation already, the warehouse has significance. The next shot is a shot of Michael from Diversity Day.
I am Michael, and I am part English, Irish, German, and Scottish.
Now, the moment itself from a narrative perspective doesn't have any specific relevance to the Scranton Strangler's story. The real clue here is simply Michael. And I mentioned in the previous episode, in the enlistment and briefing episode, that Michael is in fact a genius.
I wasn't really planning on leaving. All I wanted was a raise. How on earth did Michael call my bluff? Is he some sort of secret genius? Sometimes I say crazy things.
So even specialty paper, say 94 brightness, double bonded, you would put that on the same truck as your conventional stock?
You sure know a lot about paper for a lawyer.
Oh, well, that is because I am a genius.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Right, so the shot of him here is to reinforce that we need to pay attention to Michael. Michael is not an idiot. He is, in fact, a genius. And above and beyond that, Michael knows about Dwight and how dangerous of a character he really is. He's aware of the financial fraud going on, but not only that, Michael is in fear of his life. We know from the episode Viewing Party that Michael keeps a loaded gun in his desk somewhere in his office.
Damn, I have a loaded gun in my desk at work.
And in the deleted scenes of the initiation episode, when Dwight brings Ryan into Michael's office, look at Michael's reaction to what Dwight says.
Take a good look at this boy,
I always do.
because you are never going to see him again.
If you lay a finger
Today
on...
is right.
So you can see, guys, now that we know the Scranton Strangler is Dwight, the meaning of a scene like this completely changes. Right, Michael knows that Dwight is dangerous, so when Dwight is telling him you're never going to see him again, Michael's taking that very much to heart, right? And you can see his reaction is reflective of this. So the clue here, in short, is Michael is a genius. We need to understand that he has significantly greater awareness than we're led to believe. Sure, with some things he might be a bit foolish, but even that we need to take with a grain of salt. right? Because there may be a justification in the way of him trying to achieve some sort of an end goal, through his intelligent means. But that's the clue here. Pay attention to Michael. The next shot is a shot of the photocopier. Now, there are two shots in the intro sequence of the photocopier, and this concept that I'm about to share with you guys is going to be maybe a little bit more difficult to get your head around, especially this early in the investigation. Now, the photocopier does form a motif in the show. We know that the photocopier breaks or is faulty, then they get a new copier, then they're considering buying a new photocopier when we have a battle between buying new chairs and buying a new photocopier, and the Michael Scott Paper Company actually inherits the faulty copier from Dunder Mifflin. They must have pulled it out of the trash and they put it in the Michael Scott Paper Company. At some point in the series as well, Dwight actually puts a security code on the photocopier as well. So there's significance to the photocopiers, and they certainly form a motif. Now, I haven't completely fit this element into the story yet, but one thing that I strongly believe in is that the photocopiers link into this concept of replicants. When Dwight and Angela have their parental agreement fail and they bring the mediator into the office, one of the clauses in their pre-existing parental agreement pertained to replicants.
I don't follow this exactly. The descendants of any replicants from this union shall have
Joint custody.
Are we talking about your grandchildren?
No.
That's why we specified descendants versus replicants.
Mm-hmm.
So you're talking about a clone of your child?
No, clone has a pejorative connotation. That's why we've agreed to use the word replicants.
As I understand the technology...
You don't understand the technology, which is why this whole contract should be null and void.
Now, guys, this is going to get a little bit difficult to get your head around initially, right? But we have a scenario in the Scranton Strangler story where every character is in one shape or form the same as other characters. Now, obviously, they're still individual characters, but in one way or another, they're actually the same as other characters. For example, there's some existing fan theory around Meredith actually being Pam, 10 or 15 years into the future or whatever it is. And I can tell you that this is actually the case. Obviously, they're individual characters, but they each symbolize the same persona, if you want to put it that way, in a repeated story, right? Just that each individual character is at a different stage in this story. Now, I'm not going to touch on what those repeated series of events are right now. I think it would just get way too confusing at this stage of the investigation to list that repeated series of events. But to give you a few examples where we sort of have this concept of replicants in the way of characters. We've got Erin, Pam, and Meredith. All three of them are redheads or gingers, right? But all three of them are at different stages in their lives. We can see Erin has just started as a receptionist. Pam is now married with kids, so she's 10 years down the road. And then Meredith is divorced with children, so it's even further down the road, right? So all three of these characters represent the same sort of general persona within this series of events. We can also put Dwight Jr., Dwight, and Gabe as well in this sort of character. In a lot of ways, this is also the same character, just at different stages in this particular story. Now, the other thing I want to mention, and I'm not going to touch on this too much, right? But I also strongly believe the photocopiers link into some sort of a time-traveling concept. They're possibly a faulty time-traveling device. Like in the example I give in the extraterrestrial time-traveling task force overview, if you imagine in a time traveling or a time loop scenario, we do actually have a possibility that we can have more of the same individual within the same timeline. For example, in Back to the Future 2, Marty goes back to 1955 and he sees himself, his 1985 self, in 1955 as well. Now, they're obviously individuals, but they're also the same. Right, so this is an example where the replicants can come out, or where replicants could be produced if we factor into account time travel. Right, so I suspect the photocopiers have some link to the time traveling element as well. But really, I think the central point is the photocopiers are strongly linked to the replicant concept. Now, I know this is probably a little bit difficult to get your head around at this point, right? But that's why they're put there. And we really need to focus in on any sort of story arc or plot that revolves around the photocopier. The next is a shot of Kevin using a digital calculator. And in the colorblind financial fraud regulator, I went into a lot of detail around the types of financial fraud that is inferenced through motif and various story arcs, right? But in short, the clue that's being given to us here is to look at the finances of the company, also to pay attention to Kevin. I mean, it's ultimately Kevin crunching the numbers. That also has a very strong link to Kevin cooking the books or tampering with the finances of the company. And many fans for a significant period of time have already posited this possibility, right? And it's 100% the case, guys, and that's why this shot has been included in the intro sequence. But just to also briefly mention, it's not just Kevin, it's Kevin, Dwight, Angela, and Creed, and possibly more individuals involved. I'm currently still suspicious on Oscar, right? But it's not just Kevin, but Kevin, you could say, is the finance assassin, right? He's the one who actually does the killing of the books, if you want to look at it that way. But that's the clue. The next shot is of Dwight shredding some sort of ID card or a card with a magnetic strip. I still haven't worked out what this card is, guys. In my entire time of investigating this investigation, I just haven't really been led to that. So that'll be something for the task force to look at. However, there is a lot going on in this scene. This scene comes from Diversity Day.
Wait, what? I'm sorry, Mr. Deckard. I think I'm losing you. Hello? Hello? Yeah. Hold on one sec. I don't know. Hold on one second. Do you really have to do that right now?
Yes, I do. I should have done this weeks ago, actually.
Mr. Deckard, I'm sorry about that. What were you... Can you hold on 1 second? Yeah, just 1 second. Thanks. Hello? Oh, that's it. Perfect. So what I was saying... Hello? Thanks, Dwight.
Retaliation. Tit for tit.
That is not the expression.
Well, it should be.
Now, the first thing Dwight does is he seems to be redacting elements of these documents. And you can see in this shot of shared right now, we can see through the sort of transparency of the paper that it's some type of Dunder Mifflin documentation. So I don't believe these are private documents. These are documents that pertain to the company. Now, when Jim confronts him about this and says, do you have to do this now? Dwight says that he should have done this weeks ago. And I suspect this is because the camera crew is there and whatever tracks he's trying to cover up, right? He's probably left it a little bit too late. Maybe he didn't think that the pilot of the show would succeed, or perhaps he thought that the camera crew were only going to come in there once, and then he realized, oh, they're actually going to be here for a longer period of time, and then he feels like he has to cover his tracks. Now, I think there's a strong link to some sort of financial fraud here. I mean, I don't know what the documents are, but he's redacting and then he's shredding. So whatever that information is, he's very, very conscious of the fact he wants it to be irretrievable. The next interesting thing in this moment is when Jim unplugs Dwight's shredder. Dwight ends up hanging up Jim's call, right? And then Dwight tells him it's retaliation, tit for tit.
Thanks, Dwight.
Retaliation. Tit for tit.
That is not the expression.
Well, it should be.
Now, this statement, tit for tit, is actually the source of Dwight's trauma. He's the source of his childhood trauma. Now, in isolation, you can't come to this conclusion. We're going to have to get to a couple of other episodes first, right? But the way this is usually heard, I think, by most fans is as though it's a play on words of tit for tat. Now, this is correct, but there's more to it than just that. And the correct way to actually interpret this line is more from a biblical sense. And specifically the book of Exodus, chapter 21, verse 23 to 25, which goes like this. And if any mischief follow, thou shalt give life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burning for burning, wound for wound, stripe for stripe. And if you're Dwight Schrute, tit for tit. It's about repaying in Dwight's case, right? And we're going to find out through this investigation, right, that her breast was effectively stolen from Dwight. A breast that was rightfully his, right, was denied him. Right, and this story about vengeance and the source of his trauma comes from ultimately a lack of or a limited amount of breastfeeding as a baby. Now, before you jump ahead right now and go, what the hell are you talking about? Right, we need to understand that breasts, boobs, big boobs, small boobs, breastfeeding babies, these are all incredibly strong motifs in the show. Hannah, when she comes from Stanford, she openly pumps her breasts in the office. Jan also ends up breastfeeding her baby in the office. When Pam has Cece, they have difficulty breastfeeding Cece, so they have to get the breastfeeding specialist guy in. They end up breastfeeding the wrong baby. We have Meredith's singular boob hangout. We also have Dwight's aunt who has a singular boob hang out of her t-shirt. And Michael also asks Karen when he's doing his lecture circuit whether she needs to go and pump. Right, so breasts, breastfeeding, breast milk, single breasts, tit for tit. This is an incredibly strong motif. And when we put together all the parts in various episodes of Dwight's life, we're going to find out that the source, it's not the only source of Dwight's trauma. Dwight had a very traumatic childhood, right? But the beginning, the absolute start of his trauma is a limited amount of breastfeeding. And just quickly, guys, we're told this explicitly. When Pam's milk is coming in on the episode Secretary's Day, Dwight offers to drain Pam's breasts in 3 squeezes, right? And he says it's going to traumatize him.
All right, this is going to traumatize me a hell of a lot more than you, believe me.
You know what, Dwight? Let me just check the bathroom first. Okay?
Really? Fine, let your breasts explode. 3 squeezes and I would drain you.
Now, this saying tit for tit is what this scene is giving us. Right? It's informing us of Dwight's trauma. It's informing us of the seriousness and the central role that breasts play in the Scranton Strangler mystery. So breasts are a big part of it, but also vengeance. The saying tit for tit points us in the direction of breasts, right? But when we couple that with the biblical reference, there is an element of vengeance here, and Dwight is ultimately on a crusade to avenge his childhood trauma.
A hero is born out of a childhood trauma or out of a disaster that must be avenged.
Now, as I said, I don't know what the card is, right? I still haven't worked it out, and it's been bugging me this entire time. So this is definitely, if anyone can provide a solid theory around this card, that will definitively be considered for the big surprise. However, the shredders are another motif in the show. And I'm not going to list all of them right now. If you've seen the whole series, you'll know there's a number of references to shredders, but there's one in particular that I want to bring to your attention. And it's this concept of Meredith taking a dump in the shredder. Meredith tells us twice that she's taken a dump in the shredder.
I just feel lucky that I got a chance to share my crummy story with anyone out there who thinks they're the only one to take a dump in a paper shredder. Sure, I gave everybody pink eye once, and my ex keyed a few of their cars. And yeah, I BM'd in the shredder on New Year's.
This concept is again repeated in the episode 607, The Lover, when Michael goes to talk to Toby about how hostile Pam is being to him in the office. He actually sits down on the shredder.
Sit down for a second.
Yeah, or pull up a chair and sit on the shredder.
This is reinforcing the event that somebody took a dump in the shredder. So there's significance to the shredder from the perspective that Meredith has taken a dump in the shredder. It helps us to decode various things that happen in season 1, but because it's a motif, there may be additional applications, so it's something that we need to keep in mind. The next shot is assumingly Pam whiting out some sort of a document that pertains to the printers. Now guys, I have no idea what this document is at this stage. My suspicion is it again links into this concept of replicants. I mean, we have a document here that's talking about checking the printers, the number of checks, the check-in, check-outs. I don't know what this document is. This is one for the task force. If anyone can unearth anything around this document, it's in the intro sequence. By now you should realize the intro sequence has significance. Not only for season 1, we're going to be monitoring the changes in the intro sequence throughout the entire show. But this is one for the task task force, unfortunately, I cannot provide any information or any further links besides the replicant's concept. The next shot is of Jim, and this also comes from the episode Diversity Day. This is when he's having that discussion with his customer that's responsible for paying him 25% of his commissions per year.
Mr. Deckard, we didn't lose your sale today, did we? Excellent. Okay. Let me just get your... What's that? No, we didn't close last time. I just need your, Oh. What code were you given? Oh, okay. Yeah, no, that's actually another salesman here. Yeah, I can redo it if you want to do that. Oh, he gave you a discount? No, I don't blame you.
Now, guys, I've worked in sales pretty much for my entire life, right? A customer that's responsible for a quarter of your yearly commissions, that is a big deal. That is a serious deal. Now, there's a couple of things this scene is trying to communicate to us. The first is that Dwight is not actually the number one sales guy in the company, that it's actually Jim. And there are many things that happen in the show that reinforce this concept. Now, you might say to yourself, hold on a second, Dwight wins the best sales guy of the year award. He also beats the computer. I mean, what do you mean he's not the best sales guy? What we're going to find out, guys, relatively quickly is that Dwight is hacking the system a number of different ways. First of all, this sale that Jim made with his customer, Dwight steals this sale. I have always hated sales sharks, right? Good salespeople don't have to steal sales. Think of Danny Cordray. He doesn't have to steal sales. He's just good. If you're someone who steals sales, right, get the hell out of this task force. It's absolutely disgusting. Good salespeople don't shark sales from their colleagues. This is the first thing. Dwight steals this sale, and it's an absolute dog act. The other thing that Dwight tells us is that he won the Best Sales Guy award 13 out of the 12 months.
I have been Salesman of the Month for 13 out of the last 12 months. You heard me right. I did so well last February, the corporate gave me 2 plaques in lieu of a pay raise.
There aren't 13 months in a year, guys. Right? What we're being told here is that Dwight is likely, attributing an additional month's worth of revenue into his figures. Right? He's hacking the numbers. Not only that, Dwight tells us that he buys paper from himself.
What do I do with my bonus check? Simple. Purchase paper from myself. Boosts my sales, which boosts my bonus. Last year, I bought even more paper to make this year's bonus even bigger. Eventually, I'll get a bonus so big I can retire on it.
So you start to put this image together, guys, and you realize, Dwight is not the best sales guy. He can't sell to women.
Gina said that?
He steals leads from Staples. And when they go out on the traveling salesman episode, if Jim isn't there with Dwight, Dwight just comes across as way too intense. Right? Dwight is not the number one sales guy. Now, this also does link into the curse of 3, because ultimately, in the hierarchy of the office, we have Michael as number 1, and if Jim is the best sales guy, this puts him in the position of number 2 for various promotions, and we see throughout the show that Michael would love to cozy up more to Jim, but Jim just doesn't want it. Right, so it's not just about Jim being the number one sales guy. What it ultimately means is in the hierarchy of the office, Jim is number 2, and this relegates Dwight to number 3, which again links into the curse of 3 and Dwight's childhood trauma. Right, so it goes beyond just recognizing that Jim is the number one sales guy. What this ultimately means is that Jim is also a massive competitor to Dwight, and he's a rival to Dwight. And understanding that dynamic is crucial. The next shot is of someone highlighting what appears to be some sort of a document pertaining to building codes, and specifically the frontages, or what I assume to be the hedges around the office. And a lot of fans have already pointed out that it's certainly irking that somebody is circling with a highlighter as opposed to actually highlighting it. Now, the symbolism or meaning of that I haven't worked out, but I do believe I've worked out the significance of this document. There's a couple of times in the show where we see the hedges sort of have a moment of prominence. In the flashing episode where Phyllis gets flashed, Dwight runs down to the bushes with his sharpened broomstick and starts poking into the bushes or into the hedges to see if anybody's hiding there. When Michael Scott gets kicked out of Dunder Mifflin by Charles Minor, he sneaks back into the office and he pops out of the hedges, right? So the hedges do form somewhat of a motif in the show. Now, guys, this one's probably just going to be a little bit too hectic for you to first latch onto, right? But I'm going to tell you anyways, right? I believe the hedges out the front of the office are symbolic of pubic hair. And in the Bob Kazamakis Sex Investigation Squad overview, I detail how that symbolism fits in with various other agreed upon symbols by the creators, right? And again, before you jump ahead and go, what the hell are you talking about, right? We need to keep in mind that we have multiple mentions to pubic hair and also the bushiest beaver.
Way to go, Phyllis. Nice work. Per usual.
This says bushiest beaver.
Let's talk cubes, people.
Now, as we already know, any repetition of any concept forms a motif. Right now, the very use of the word frontage, I believe, is referencing the pubic region of an individual, and that the hedges themselves are symbolic of pubic hair. If you go and watch the Bob Kazamakis Sex Investigation Squad episode, that'll be broken down in a little bit more detail, but as I said, everything pertaining to that element of the mystery is strictly on Patreon. But that's ultimately the clue here. And I just want to briefly mention, guys, right, that each shot in the intro sequence could have different meaning. I mean, if we go back to the secret sign, the flipping of Dwight's tie around his neck was purely symbolic. However, to work out the reference relating to Ryan lifting his bag, that related to plot. So these shots in the intro sequence aren't necessarily decoded in the same way. That's ultimately the point I want to briefly make here. Now, the next shot is a shot of Pam, which is from a deleted scene in The Alliance.
Dunder Mifflin, this is Pam. Hold, please.
Ew. Oh, righty then. Well, I see you're going for the whole board supermodel thing. Dunder Mifflin, this is Pam. May I help you? Smoke.
I wasn't really going for anything.
I get it. A child is born. Beautiful sunset. Now I'll catch the next one, right? Unicorn walks into the office. Oh, do you have an appointment? Okay, look, Pam, this is not meant as a criticism, but let me tell you what you're doing wrong. You're the voice of this company, right? And when clients call and you're not smiling, they can hear that in your voice. It is a real turnoff.
Are you being serious?
Yes, I am, absolutely. So, the next call we get, I'd like you to smile. I'd like to see a big smile.
Okay.
Okay.
No one's calling.
I know, somebody will. And we'll wait.
Sometimes there's a lot of time between the calls.
I knew. We will wait.
Okay.
We will wait for the call. And you will smile. Let me try something, just while we're waiting.
Okay.
Tell me if I'm smiling or not. Hi, Pam. How are you? Was I smiling?
Yes.
Okay, let me try this one. Hi, Pam. How are you?
No.
I mean, you can tell.
Yeah,
Right. No,
I
I
could
wasn't
tell.
smiling that time, and they can tell too.
That was a good example.
Thank you. All right. When we get a call, I'll come back, and you'll do the smile.
Okay.
Showtime! It's showtime!
Dunder Mifflin, this is Pam. One moment, I'll transfer you.
Okay.
Now, similarly to Michael's shot, I don't believe there is any significance in the way of plot or narrative in this moment. Like in Michael's shot, the clue was simply Michael, and in this particular case, the clue is simply Pam. And I can tell you now, there is a significant number of times when Pam is the missing link to decoding a mystery in the show. I've already mentioned in the previous episode that Pam has knowledge about Dwight, his family relationships. I haven't worked out out how she knows this, although I have suspicions, and those suspicions are likely going to be shared on the Patreon if you can guess what those suspicions are, right? But ultimately the clue here is Pam. Right, and Pam is ultimately used as well as Meredith and as well as every other redhead throughout the entire show, because redheads are another ridiculously strong motif. That motif video is probably going to have to come at the end of this series, guys, because I'm sure people have already noticed, but even in the background, the amount of redheads this show has is absolutely ridiculous, right? And ultimately, the ginger-haired woman is symbolic of Dwight's adopted mother. And again, that adoption isn't as you think. It's not a standard adoption, and I'm really putting it lightly here, and we'll get to that at a later episode, right? But Pam's role is partly symbolic as the motherly figure in this mystery, and we also need to keep in mind that Pam knows. So Michael knows because he's a genius, whereas in Pam's case, she knows because she's linked into the gossip of the office, and there are a number of reasons for that. Right, but that's ultimately the clue here. We need to pay attention to Pam. She plays a very important role in the Scranton Strangler mystery. The next shot is the water cooler, and the water cooler also forms a motif because the water cooler is involved in a number of different scenes and episodes to varying degrees of centrality, right? But it definitely forms a motif. We have the case in the Alliance where Dwight brings the water cooler closer to himself because he wants to be in on the scuttlebutt. And then when Sabre takes over Dunder Mifflin and they're waiting in line to fill up their bottles, the water cooler runs out of water. And I can name a number of more references, right? Now, my current working theory actually is revolved around poisoning. Right, and poisoning is another repeated motif in the show. Dwight thinks that Jim has poisoned him in Tallahassee. Packer ends up lacing the cupcakes. Ryan ends up crushing up some aspirin into a chocolate mousse for Michael, right? So there's a number of references to poisoning or to lacing of various edible or ingestible materials. And we find out from Dwight that Dwight brings his own water to work.
It's a real shame, because studies have shown that more information gets passed through water cooler gossip than through official memos, which puts me at a disadvantage because I bring my own water to work.
Now, my suspicion is that Dwight is actually lacing the water supply in the office. Right? Why, how, what his end goal is, I'm not exactly sure about those things. But when we couple the motifs, we definitely have a water cooler motif. We have a motif around poisoning and lacing of ingestibles, right? And then we also have Dwight telling us that he brings his own water to work. And there's even more references I could share, guys. But for now, I just want to briefly touch on that I believe that the water coolers or the water supply in the office is being tainted by Dwight. For what end goal, I'm unsure of exactly. I mean, I have a few ideas I can posit to you, right? But ultimately, the clue that I believe is being communicated to us here is that the water supply is being tampered with. Now, the next shot is of Ryan on the phone, and this scene comes from the pilot episode.
I heard they might be closing this branch down. That's just a rumor going around. This is my first day. I don't really know.
Now, this is somewhat of a massive clue. Understanding that the Dunder Mifflin Company, as well as the Scranton branch, is having difficulty financially is crucial to understand, not only from the financial fraud perspective, but it opens up our eyes to a number of other things. You know, to give you a couple of examples, we know in the beginning of the series, Scranton is not the best branch. Right, and then later on when David Wallace is having a chat with Michael, we find out that Dunder Mifflin is performing the best out of any branch. Right, so we seem to have this disconnect, and I believe that particular example can be again explained by the tampering of the finances by Dwight and his accomplices. So for example, in the beginning of the series, Dwight is trying to usurp Michael, or he's trying to get Michael to move on. So perhaps he makes the numbers look poor so that Michael's job becomes in jeopardy. Now, the moment the entire office's future is put at risk, then all of a sudden sudden the strategy changes to ensure that if any brand shuts down, it's not Dunder Mifflin. Now all of a sudden maybe more money is laundered through the company, or the books are cooked in a certain way to make the office look like it's performing excellently, right? These are just examples, but the ultimate clue here is we need to pay attention of the financial situation not only of Scranton but the entire company, and this strongly links into the directive of the colorblind financial fraud regulator. The next shot is Dwight, the huge symbolic sign that is telling us that he's the Strangler. We have a cord being wrapped around his neck. This moment is purely symbolic to imply to us that he's the Scranton Strangler. Go and watch Strangler Revealed Part 1. Ryan lifting his bag. It's lifted up for us to direct us to the scene in the basketball episode. We follow the clues and we find out that Dwight's outfit is highly suspicious and he didn't know about the game. Go and watch Part 1 and Part 2. We've already covered this. Now the next shot is very important as well. This is a shot of Jim and Pam, and this is from the episode Hot Girl. Now the basic plot of this episode, I'm sure a lot of you guys have already seen it, right? But the basic plot is a hot girl called Katie comes into the office to sell some handbags, and all the guys are infatuated with the hot girl. Now this moment that we see of Jim and Pam is when Jim pranks Dwight and convinces him to buy a handbag.
Okay, shh, stop. Whatever you're doing, because this is going to be good.
Hi, my name's Dwight Schrute, and I would like to buy a purse from you. Good Lord, look at these purses. This is something special. Oh my God, is this Salvatore Ticini pasta?
Oh, definitely step in and out of it like that.
Yes.
Yeah, you
well,
put it on.
I want to stress test it, in case anything happens. Oh. That was really... This is necessary to do, to really give it a good workout. This is the prettiest one of all. I'm gonna be the prettiest girl in the ball. Oh, how much?
Oh, God, it's sad. It's so sad.
Here he comes. You can pick a good one.
You're horrible.
Now that we know what we know, guys, this scene completely changes in meaning. Now, the first thing I want to say, guys, and I didn't mention this scene in the first 2 episodes, right? But this shot forms a part of the Curse of 3 in the intro sequence. We have tie flip, Ryan's bag, Jim and Pam pointing. I know they're not pointing with their fingers, but they're ultimately pointing with their eyes. We have another example of a look here shot, right? And this is the 3 stack. This is the triple shot that formulates the complete secret sign to the intro sequence. Tie flip, bag, Jim and Pam. This is the 3rd one. Now, when we look at what's going on in this scene, right, Dwight is looking at the bags and he's looking at them with a particular perspective. And what that perspective is whether this bag can be used against the person carrying it as a strangling cord. He steps through the orange one, he tests the bands, and he says, this is not one that I'm buying. This particular bag is a liability to the wearer. Right, we can see that his strangling persona is coming out in this scene. Instead, he goes to the bag that has shorter loops. So first of all, that particular bag, the carrying handles or whatever you want to call it, could not be used as a cord in a strangling scenario. Not only that, he hits the second bag on the table. He's testing its toughness and its rigidity. So he's now thinking, well, could this bag be used as a weapon against a possible attacker? Right, so he's comparing 2 bags from the perspective of a professional strangler. And which bag does he end up choosing? The one that's strangle-proof. Now, this bag he ends up giving to Kelly. And the relationship between Dwight and Kelly is something we're also going to be paying attention to within the story. Right, so back to the main point though, guys. He chooses the bag that's strangle-proof and then he gives that one to Kelly. And from now on, guys, I strongly believe every time you see this intro sequence, you are never going to unsee those 3 shots ever again. And this is what I sort of mentioned by the show's going to change for you forever, guys. The creators in one way are actually strangling what the show means to you, right? And what the show has meant to you for this entire time. This investigation is going to murder the show you believe you loved. And in that sense, it truly is an artistic masterpiece, right? But in short, tie flip, bag lift, Jim and Pam. This is the Curse of 3 secret sign. 3 shots, all arrows point to Dwight being the Scranton Strangler. The next shot is a shot of Michael moving his Dundee or repositioning his Dundee on his desk. Now we got to keep in mind, guys, we already have a shot dedicated to Michael. Right, so we already have the direction in the way that, pay attention to Michael. Michael is a genius. He knows what's going on. This shot is a little bit different, and I strongly believe, guys, this shot relates to the concept of prophecy. Throughout the show, we have a number of examples where future events end up being prophesied. A good example is in the episode Chair Model. Michael expects the office to write a name down on a piece of paper for a suitable partner or a wife for him. And Jim ends up putting down Pam's mother.
Who are you putting down?
Oh, you don't know her?
Who is it?
Your mom?
Yeah, whatever.
Now, what happens a couple of seasons later? Michael ends up dating Pam's mother. In the Ms. Boobshirt episode, right? Ms. Boobshirt comes to work and Michael tells everybody that he's in the midst of a passionate love affair with her.
There's this woman I met a few weeks ago. Her name is Donna. She's a manager of the Sid and Dexters. And right now, we're in the midst of a passionate love affair. No, but she is coming by today.
And what ends up happening? He ends up getting involved in a passionate love affair. Now, to go back to this shot of Michael shifting the Dundee, right, that shot actually prophesies what ends up happening, because we never see that shot actually happen in season 1. Unless I'm making a mistake here, I don't believe we see that shot in season 1. The first and last time we actually see that shot happen is in Michael's last episode, right? So that moment is prophesied. And what we're going to find out throughout this series, right, is prophecy plays a big part of it. And that links into the sort of time traveling concept and predicting the future. There's a strong link to that. Now, what I want to mention, guys, is in the examples I've just mentioned, right, I'm able to show you where the prophecy occurs. We need to be very mindful of the fact that we may end up being given a prophecy, right, but we may not see it be fulfilled explicitly. Do you understand? So the prophecy, the simple act of prophesying, is there to fill in gaps of the Scranton Strangler story. It is a very critical concept to understand. We're interested not only in the explicit examples of prophecy coming true, we're primarily interested in prophecy itself. Now, the last thing I want to mention about this shot is the Dundees also form somewhat of a motif. We have a number of episodes dedicated to the Dundees, and we also have a number of references dedicated to the Dundees, right? So definitely something that we need to keep in mind. Perhaps there is additional application in the way of story arc or plot. The final shot, guys, is the title shot. And there's one primary thing I want to mention about this particular shot. Obviously, we have the graphics that are similar to some sort of a toilet graphic, right? We have one person standing, one person sitting down. Look, I'm not actually sure if there's any additional symbolism there. What I want to share with you is actually the plate that the logo is on. If you look at the logo, guys, you'll notice it looks as though it's on a number plate, the same sort of a number plate that you would find on a vehicle. So in some ways, this is the most subtle sort of clue out of the entire intro sequence. And as we investigate this mystery, you'll realize that working this clue out really happens in season 9. But I've made it easy for everyone, and I actually explained this in the Bob Kazamakis Sex Investigation Squad episode, right? What you find out in season 9 explicitly is that vehicles or cars are symbolic of the human body. Throughout the show, the vehicles people drive are symbolic of themselves and their anatomies. right? So the actual title of the show is put on a number plate. And the reason for that is because understanding the symbology of the vehicles is critical. You know, for example, in some of the overviews, I mentioned this concept where Michael talks about parking on graves. And I'm not going to fill in the dots for you right now, guys, but if vehicles are the human body, well, what do you think parking on a grave means? Right? So understanding the symbology around cars or vehicles being the human body is critical to understanding so many moments in the show. And it's no mistake, it's not coincidental that the logo is put on what I believe or what I see as a number plate. Now I want to just briefly mention one more thing around the vehicles. We also do find out throughout the show that Dwight actually has two of the same vehicle. And this links into a multitude of other references, right? But I just want to mention that. I'm not going to go into detail about that, but immediately we have a sort of additional suspicion around the vehicles from that perspective, right? And there's a lot more I could say about that, but this particular episode's hitting time now, guys. So ultimately, that is the end of the season 1 preview, guys. There's a lot of stuff that I've covered that some of it's probably not going to make sense. Some of it, we're going to have to get to those episodes that are relevant to completely understanding some of these references. If you've seen all the task force overviews, some of the stuff I've covered in this episode is expanded on in a bit more detail, and some of it's going to make a lot more sense. Right? But ultimately, as I've already mentioned, the nature of the mystery is designed so you can't just watch episode 1 all the way until the end and get it. The mystery has been designed in a way that you need to rewatch it numerous times. But I've done that for you guys, right? So I'm able to provide you with some of these elements in advance. As we go through the series, things like Creed being Dwight's adopted father, Kevin being his adopted brother, the symbology around the vehicles, you'll notice that everything falls into place. You'll start to see the clues, and really, guys, I think by the end of this investigation, a lot of you will be like, how did I never notice any of this stuff to begin with? And it comes down to misdirection. Right? It all comes back to misdirection, and we're really going to touch on that in season 9. But in short, guys, that's the end of the season 1 preview. I really hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned a couple of new things. Don't forget, the investigation starts 3 weeks from this day. From the day I've uploaded this video, there is 3 weeks until I cover 101 Pilot. In the meantime, I am going to post a couple of more motif videos and bits and pieces, right? So there still will be content coming, but the absolute start of the investigation is in 3 weeks. So buckle in, Kemosabe, because this is going to be a wild ride. Don't forget to subscribe, turn on notifications, and join the Anti-Strangling Task Force on Patreon for exclusive episode analysis.